It's like I don't really resonate with a size 4 or a size 6, but I also don't feel like I'm resonating much with size 14 or size 16.
But for me, when people are trying to claim that they're mid-size and they're not, is so damaging to those who finally are like trying to find their place in the world and find where their body fits.
I don't know what to do moving forward because in my heart I feel like I'm a mid-size girl, but if the consensus is that I'm not, then I will have to really sit and think on that.
Today, we're talking about a very special group of people, those who identify as mid-size. They're a bit too large for regular stores, but they're also not quite so big that they fit into plus size. I mean, they're not that fat. So I guess let's start with the debate surrounding the definition of mid-size and what is considered fat enough to be in this category.
What I consider to be mid-size is basically like a size 8 through 14 maybe.
If you use the term mid-size and you are smaller than a size 14 or 16, I will block you.
Let me clarify what mid-size means. Its size is really anyone who's a size US 10 to 16.
When you go into a store, usually there are going to be sizes, maybe US 0 through 12 or 14. Anything above that is plus size.
And I fully believe that a mid-size is 14, 16, and 18. I think plus size should start at 20, and I think straight size goes up to a 12.
Stop it. Get some help.
Clearly, there's not a lot of agreement on this topic, specifically when we're trying to define the upper and lower limits of what is considered mid-size. And that makes sense when you look at women's clothing, because all of these jeans are the same size, and in this case, from the same company. And this is not unique. You see this again and again through multiple different brands. Sizing is not consistent. At this point, companies are really just putting an arbitrary number on a piece of clothing that isn't tied to any real measurement. Maybe once upon a time the numbers meant something, but then companies discovered something called vanity sizing, allowing them to sell more product to consumers by convincing them that you're not a size 16, you're only a size 12. Or even better, you're not a size 16, you're a size 1. Like, why can't we just use real measurements in clothing? Why can't a size 42 jean have a size 42-inch waist? Or whatever that is in metric. And like, I know I'm Canadian and theoretically I'm supposed to be using the metric system, but if you don't know this, Canadians have a really weird way of measuring things. Like, I'm 5'9", but the speed limit is in kilometers per hour. Or when I was working at the deli, oftentimes people will come in asking for 200 grams of honey ham and in the same breath ask for a pound of ground beef. It makes no freaking sense, so if I use units interchangeably, that's why. Anyway, obviously, people aren't going to be able to agree on what is mid-size if they're using clothing sizes to define that category, because no two size 12s are going to be the same measurements. Not to mention that this is all in US scaling. If you go to a different country, they're going to have a wildly different way of measuring their clothing. And what sizes are carried in stores are going to vary country by country and store by store. But at the end of the day, these are all just clothing sizes, and I think some people have really lost sight of that.
I got kicked out of the mid-size community. I'm in this really weird stage right now with my fashion content where a lot of people don't believe that a mid-size is a size 10, and so that's what I currently am. And also, straight sizes doesn't really feel like me. I don't feel like I am small enough to really be a straight size. It's like I don't really resonate with a size 4 or a size 6. That feels a lot smaller than me, but I also don't feel like I'm resonating much with size 14 or size 16, and I guess that's typically where mid-size was, like when I was peak mid-size content creator.
Let me just remind y'all, we're talking about a clothing size here. This is just an arbitrary number that some company has assigned to a piece of fabric you put on your body. How can you resonate with an arbitrary number, especially if clothing brands are constantly changing their sizing? Like, this is a fashion influencer. Why not market yourself as like cozy casual or casual chic or some other descriptor that fits your style rather than your body size? Which, like, by the way, I do like this girl's style. So if you're into that sort of like casual, easy fashion inspiration, I would definitely go check her out, because I don't think you need to be mid-sized to like her style.
But now I feel like I'm in this weird stage where I don't really know what to call myself other than curvy, and I know that it's really like it's not an identity thing. It's more so geared to trying to find the right audience. People can see my stuff if they have my body type and then find inspo for that. So I've been saying like curvy size 10, but I'm really not sure where I'm falling.
Not an identity thing sounds a lot different than resonating with a size 10. Now, I do understand that if somebody is looking for fashion inspiration, they're generally going to want somebody that looks somewhat similar to them. So I do see the appeal. It's useful to have an accurate descriptor when you're looking for something your size. So on one hand, I can understand why the term mid-size can be helpful to somebody like a fashion influencer, because the term mid-size sounds a lot better and is way easier to market than anyone roughly sizes 8 through 18, sometimes fits in straight sizes, but also can maybe sometimes fit in plus size. But on the other hand, if this becomes your identity, I think that's where we run into a problem.
I do consider myself mid-size because I don't think I'm skinny or small. It is important that I'm labeling myself in a way that is appropriate and correct, and so that's kind of why I want to get everyone's feedback, so I just know what to label myself as moving forward. I genuinely feel like I'm a mid-size girl, but I also don't want to offend anyone or take up a space that is not truthfully mine. I don't know what to do moving forward because in my heart I feel like I'm a mid-size girl, but if the consensus is that I'm not, then I will have to really sit and think on that.
If you have to sit and think on the fact that maybe you aren't mid-size, then I think you're maybe a little bit too invested in using your body size as your sole defining attribute. But that's just my opinion.
And I guess like every single body is different, but for me, when people are trying to claim that they're mid-size and they're not, is so damaging to those who finally are like trying to find their place in the world and find where their body fits.
You gotta find your place in the world off of your dress size. Being moderately overweight is not a defining characteristic and is not a personality type. It's not something that you need to build a community over. It is not something that can define someone. At best, mid-size can describe a range of clothing sizes. But on the flip side, if you're not too thin to be called mid-size, you're probably also too fat to be called mid-size.
And I see so many girls on here who shop in the plus size section but call themselves mid-size. And to me, it just feels like a massive effort to distance yourself from fatness.
People say mid-size because they don't want to be big, and advertising and entertainment are finally starting to catch up to that. And the reason mid-size is a good marketing tool is because it reads as a compliment. You're not the biggest.
That last clip, her name's Abby. Although I disagree with like a lot of things that she says, she is right on the money with this one. It is all just marketing. Mid-size is just another form of vanity sizing. Whether it's a company using the term or just some influencer, if the term mid-size is going to sell more product than calling it a size 10 or calling it plus size, then that's the terminology that they're going to use. But if you want to ask me, my opinion is that there shouldn't be any mid-size at all. Even by the community's own rough definition of what mid-size is, it sounds like the end goal is to abolish mid-size anyway. Because if mid-size are the sizes between a straight size and a plus size, there should be no gap. And if a US size 16 is the most common size in America, then shouldn't most stores carry that? And if companies change to include that 16 in their general sizing, then mid-size wouldn't exist. But that's where things get a little bit weird, because mid-size is not just a way to describe your size. It's also a way to measure your level of oppression.
And I get that as a person who is like mid-size, who's still experiencing like stigma on your weight, but isn't plus size or isn't maybe fat enough that you feel like you can be part of that community because you don't quite have that level of oppression. Like, I get that that's like a lonely experience, and it can feel invalidating for people to be like, well, you're not big enough to have this problem.
Now, this wasn't intended to be a video about agreeing with Abby, but she's kind of got a point here. If you're going to say that fat phobia is real, which I do believe that there is a level of stigma and bullying and unfair treatment, I'm not going to take a leap and call that oppression, but there is unfair treatment. But if there is fat phobia, why are you going to start singling out people just because they're not fat enough? Why on earth draw up walls like that?
So when I say Lena Dunham is on the smaller or mid-size, and what I'm saying is that her experience of fatness is completely and wildly different than mine as someone who is considered a super fat or an infini fat.
Should we take a moment here to define infini fat? Do y'all know what that is? Is this old news at this point? Well, as a brief overview, here it is. So for her, infini fat is anything over like a size 34-ish, which at that size, your difficulties in life are gonna extend far beyond just your clothing sizes. So like, yeah, fair, your difficulties are worse than that girl's over there. But why are you invalidating somebody else's feelings? Why are you criticizing her for experiencing fat phobia and stigma and yada 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 just because you have it worse off? This actually really reminds me of the 1,000-Pound Sisters. There's that one clip.
It's harder on me to get up and do things for myself, and you know it is.
Yeah, but it's hard on me too, Tammy.
No! Try being my size, Amy. You don't know how it is.
There will always be somebody facing greater hardships than you, being more oppressed than you, fatter than you. Why is this a competition? Why are you so concerned about where you rank in this level of fairness or fatness? Why is it so important to be more oppressed than that person over there?
So, for example, when you see smaller fats praising inclusive brands like Aerie when they're only up to a size 24, that's completely ridiculous. I and a lot of people still can't fit into that.
A size 24 is completely ridiculous. And no matter what size a store goes up to, there's always going to be somebody who's a little bit bigger or a little bit taller or just shaped in a way that isn't going to fit that sizing. So seriously, how big do you have to go before you can be considered inclusive?
What is the harm of inclusivity? I often get people in my comments viscerally angry at the mere suggestion that fat people should also be able to walk into a clothing store and buy clothes that fit them, right? What would it harm you as a thin person if you are someone who everything, the entire fashion industry is catered to? Why would it harm you? What effect would it have on you for an entire other group of people separate from you to also be allowed to spend their money how they want?
Okay, first off, I'm not angry if a company wants to increase their sizing. They can do whatever they want. My problem is the constant demand for more and bigger because it will never be enough. No, there isn't any harm in a brand becoming more inclusive. But you can't possibly expect every brand or even the majority of brands to cater to every person at every size. Especially when you consider the fact that as you go up and up in sizing, the difference in body proportions from person to person becomes more diverse. And what I mean by that is like some women will carry a lot of their weight in their hips, while others will carry a lot of their weight in their stomach or in their breasts. So designing for every single body type is going to be a lot of extra work. And actually, this same creator explained a little bit more about the difference between straight sizing, which is like normal sizes carried in stores, and what is considered plus sizing.
I realize that not everyone understands the actual difference between straight size and plus size. They are literally like different base forms and cuts of the way that clothing is made. Like you can't just take a size small and add a couple inches to create like, a 3, 4, 5X. So in order to like account for like the different shape that plus size bodies typically have, it is actually like literally created in a different way. Here's some visuals. To go up from this size small, you would do what is called grading up the pattern, which is typically just adding a certain amount of inches between each size. However, that is not something that you can do to go from straight size to plus size. So this is what happens when you try and grade up a size small to like a 1X. That doesn't really work. So that's why you're grading up to an XL or like an XXL, not a 1X. You can see right now the plus size is longer and there's more space in the bust because of this dart right here. Like literally the way that these clothing items are cut are going to be different, right?
And this is exactly my point. You can't just scale up to include larger ranges. You need whole new models, whole new patterns, whole new designs to accommodate for people in different sizes. So why wouldn't you want stores that specifically cater to that? Like having mega corporations like Walmart is great if you want to shop for the whole family and the dog. But if, for example, you're looking for something nice or specific for like your toddler, you're probably not going to be headed to ASOS or Forever 21. ASOS? I'm not actually sure. Probably you're going to choose a store that specializes in kids and toddler clothing. And I'm not trying to compare overweight people to toddlers. I'd never do that. But in reality, I am closer to the size of a toddler than some of these super morbidly obese people. So with such a huge difference, wouldn't you want a store that specifically caters to that size range? When plus sizing is so wildly different than straight size?
Brands are allowed to want a certain look and image with their products. They are allowed to make things for the people they want to make them for. I've been seeing too many people talking shit recently, and it's pissing me off. People are allowed to have preferences, and brands are allowed to create an image with what they want and have a specific type of person wear what they have. Not everybody needs to be catered to by everything and everyone. And this is a lesson I had to learn when I was fucking fat. I used to think clothes just weren't flattering. No, babe, the body wasn't fucking flattering.
So I can see why some people would get offended by what this guy had said. And I do believe that there can be some clothing that is more flattering on one body type than it is on another. But if you have poor body image, no article of clothing is going to fix that. And really, that was the main message that I got out of his little spiel there. Though he did word it rather harshly. A piece of clothing is not going to be flattering on you if you don't like what you look like. But expecting your body image to be improved or to improve your life somehow by an article of clothing is exactly how marketing works. No matter what your size is, brands are going to want you to think that you're going to look better, whatever that means to you, in their piece of clothing. They just want you to think that all you need to look like the model in the photo is their product.
And if a piece of clothing is not flattering on you, it doesn't mean the item or product is not flattering or is not good. It's not made for you.
And yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that sentiment. A piece of clothing that maybe looks horrendous on me is quite likely to look amazing on somebody else with a different body type. Or maybe that piece of clothing is just not to my taste and would fit somebody else's aesthetic much better. So if you're trying on jeans and they all look and feel terrible on you, just do what I do and wear leggings instead. And so while I can understand that a lot of people would be offended by somebody saying that your body is unflattering, I can understand the sentiment behind it. If you've got a bad sense of body image, no piece of clothing is going to fix that. You're not going to think that any piece of clothing is flattering.
Flattering is a myth.
Guess we can't win. No matter what you say, somebody's going to disagree with it. Anyway, that's about all I've got time for today, so thank you so much if you made it this far. I appreciate you so much, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye! Burp.